Hey guys, I'm here today with Brad Hart, founder of Make More Marbles. Now, Brad has a very interesting background, starting as an entrepreneur around the age of 12, building a hedge fund, and coming to a realization that what he was doing wasn't making him happy. So, I'm super excited to hear his journey, his realizations, and what that's come to mean in his life up to this point. So, Brad, my man, how are you?
I'm doing well, Josh. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Most welcome, brother. Brad, what is your current business?
So currently we actually run three businesses, and I am a big proponent that you really need a way to generate wealth, but also a way to grow it and a way to give it, right? I call it the 3G philosophy. And for a long time, my business was to grow wealth, which is what I did with my hedge fund. And funnily enough, to generate at scale was actually a new set of skills I had to learn after that whole debacle. I wouldn't call it a debacle. It was successful monetarily, but fulfillment kind of bottomed out on the whole thing. You know, I made plenty of money, but it wasn't fulfilling work and ultimately not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And then finally, I think where most people miss the boat on fulfillment, like they say, oh, money can't buy happiness. Well, they just haven't given enough away yet. So my G's are what I call my ABCs. They're Amazon, blockchain, and contribution. So the Amazon business, everybody's pretty familiar with Amazon.com. What they may not be familiar with is that every one of the products you buy, or I would say the vast majority are, products that individual retailers and resellers and merchants sell. So guys like us. And then so we have a team around that, and then there's Make More Marbles, which is kind of the contributive aspect, right? We get really excited about entrepreneurship, investing, philanthropy, and it's all centered around this idea that we can win more through collaboration than we ever could through competition. And I can dive more into that, but I'll just give you the quick overview. And then the growth aspect right now what's most exciting is obviously blockchain and cryptocurrency, although I'm not one of these people that's going to say buy 1 million Bitcoins and they'll go to the moon and hold them forever. However, I feel like if you've been in it a while, you've done well. There's certainly some really exciting developments in the blockchain space. And I get crypto's exciting. Everybody's making money in crypto. But there's so many things that the blockchain can change and so many industries that it can disrupt that I think we're only just getting started with what that's all going to do. And it could be nothing at all, right? You could lose everything, or it could be the kind of thing that's like bigger than the internet. It's just time will tell, right? So those are the three focuses: Amazon, blockchain, contribution. Those are my ABCs, and that's the way I generate, grow, and give money.
Love it. So, take us back in time. Take us back to when you were 12. Because you've got a family's got history in commerce in some way, shape, or form, correct?
Yeah, that's right. My great uncle was a stock guy. He invested in Standard Oil and Bell Telephone at the turn of like the Depression era. And obviously those companies kept, dividing and antitrust, and they ended up being like 20, 25 companies in the oil and gas industry and also the telecom industry. So the companies you might recognize today is like AT&T and Sprint and Verizon all started there, as well as ExxonMobil, Texaco, and those types of companies. So that was kind of that background, and that's why I got excited about it, because I saw what the power of investing small over a long period of time could do. Because a couple $100 back then was a lot of money, certainly. But, not something that most people couldn't get together. It'd be like the equivalent of maybe $10,000 or $20,000 today. It's not unheard of to have that much money lying around. Invested smartly, was able to retire my grandfather in his old age, which was kind of cool. He could live off the dividends. So I saw the power of that. The entrepreneurship story was really cool because it kind of happened on accident. My dad was injured when I was about 2 years old. He was driving a lumber truck to support my mother and I. And I'm an only child, and one day he was driving down the hill, and the load shifted in the back of the cab of the truck and came through and pinned him to the steering wheel and rendered him unable to walk for about 6 months. So he would get around on a mechanic's creeper, and during that time he produced a lot of art. And he eventually had a surgery that allowed him to walk again, but he was never not in pain again. So he would medicate with alcohol, caffeine, marijuana, whatnot. He was a little bit tough to be around. He had swings and depression and all that good stuff. So for me, as the only child, and my mom left to go support us, she was living and working elsewhere at the time. It basically fell on me to make sure that the dishes were clean and that the trash was taken out and that the lawn was mowed. One day, the lawnmower broke. So what I knew is that we didn't have a lot of money, to go ahead and get this lawnmower fixed. So I came up with a plan. I went to the to the neighbors, and I said, hey, can I borrow your mower? And they said, sure. I said, well, we also need to fix our mower. Would you pay me $20 to mow your lawn, and then I can fix our mower? And they said, yeah, sure, why not? So I accidentally had just found a lead and sold them and delivered value and all these things about a business, right? And so that summer I started making more money kind of on the side, and eventually I got some jobs and figured out little other pieces. And really it just started out as that, right? I kind of accidentally fell into this idea of, oh, we need money? Okay, cool, I'll go find some money. And I didn't know, nobody was standing around telling me I couldn't do that, so I just went and did it. And that's kind of how it started.
That's cool. So more of an accidental entrepreneurship kind of binge as a child.
You got it.
How do you go from accidental entrepreneurial ventures, and when you say accidental, what kind of incomes are we talking about at that stage? Are you making a couple $100 here and there, or is it?
Yeah, it wasn't tons of money. I remember I would have to save up pennies and nickels from cans, and I remember my dad had this L-shaped ruler in the garage, and he was a big car nut. He had a ton of tools. So I would have to take this L-shaped ruler, and we worked out that if it was this many coins this way and this many coins this way, I would have enough money to rent a video game, which I think was $2 at the time. So I had to figure out mathematically where 200 coins were and use that ruler as a way to count instead of having to count them out by hand. And it was actually pretty effective. So that was actually one of my first memories of money being valuable and worth something. And if I could work for it and find it, I could get what I wanted, above and beyond the basics, like food, water, shelter, that kind of thing. Social Security and disability, and my mom's income, kind of supplanted that. But if I wanted anything else, above and beyond that, like TV dinners and soda, basically, I had to go out and find it.
When did that switch to more of a formal business? That mindset of, I've got a little hobby that pays for my stuff, to, hey, I'm running a business now. Let's actually work out how we can grow this thing.
Yeah, it's actually fun. It's a great question. I actually maximized a lot of jobs throughout high school. I remember I would go through high school just trying to find the next best job. I would hear about somebody making more money than I did, and I was like, oh, I want to do that next, right? So one of those jobs was working at a shooting range, and it was the first time I ever got paid in tips. So I remember one of the earliest memories of that was I was teaching people how to shoot skeet and trap safely, and pulling the targets, which is, the little clay, they call them pigeons or birds, but they're just clay targets. And at the end of one of the rounds, a guy handed me a $20 bill, and I was like, holy crap. It was a lot of money at the time, right? I was like, what do you do for a living? He's like, oh, I own a mechanic shop. I ended up being friends with this guy for a little while. It was pretty fun. So that was my first, if I work harder and give people the service they love, then they'll give me tips and I can make more money. So I think at that job I might have made $5 or $6, compared to my job before that where I made $6.15 an hour working a grill at a water park. But I knew there was this variable, right? If I worked harder, I could get tips. So that was actually kind of cool. And then later I was an EMT and I worked as a bartender because that was the next best thing, right? I was 18 now and I could sling drinks. So I literally just bluffed my way into one of the nicest catering halls on the island, took the bartending course. That weekend I got my first job and I just hustled and I started banking money. And at that point I could bank, $10,000 in a summer more. And I ended up paying my way through college, along with some help from my parents, mostly through bartending. And I wrote papers for people. I remember I had guys that were in 400 level English classes that would come to me and be like, hey, we got a paper for me. I'd be like, well, the one kid in particular was a referral from my roommate. And he knew this kid who was a professional poker player. And he was doing really well. His senior year of college, he was an English major. And he made $200,000 that year playing poker. So he had a lot of money kicking around. So I'm like, all right, $500. He's like, done. You get me an A on this paper, I'll happily pay you $500 and I'll give you a bonus. I'm like, all right, I can do this. So I would go and get the Shakespeare book and read every word of the sonnet or whatever they were trying to do, and I would write a paper, and he was getting C's and B's and D's, and I would crush it, and then he would get an A+, and I'd never even step foot in that 400 level English class. So just stuff like that would kind of pay the bills and provide beer money. When I wasn't full time working, it was I was always hustling at something. So that was kind of fun. And I think my first really entrepreneurial job, which kind of got me back into that, was just after school. So when I graduated in 2007, I had a degree in biology. I wanted to be a doctor. I didn't quite get the grades I wanted to get into the schools I wanted. So I'm like, all right, I'll take a year off and I'll reapply again. So what ends up happening is I come out of school, and I'd always wanted to live in New York City, and I got a little bit of money together, and I moved into New York City into Ridgewood, Queens, out by the Jamaica stop, way out at the end of the line. With some cousins of mine and this Polish guy named Mike. So there's like three cousins and a Polish guy named Mike living in this apartment. It sounds like a sitcom, right? And I would take the train in. I think it was like the E to the maybe A train or something like that, all the way into the city. It was like an hour and a half. And I would just pound
through my mind as you're saying that before. Just Goodwill Hunting.
What's that?
Goodwill Hunting.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd make the Matt Damon reference, but or comparison, but yeah, hey, if the shoe fits. So I'm driving. I'm going to the city every day on the train, and I'm wearing my best suit. And it's like August, right? It's like the middle of summer. So I'm pounding pavement in the suit. I'm just literally going rejection. But I'm like the same kid I always was, very self-assured, chip on my shoulder, yada yada yada. And I go into every bar in New York City, and finally, I walked in this Irish bar on 45th Street, and I'll never forget this. This woman, Angela, kind of looks me up and down. She's like, "What experience you have?" I'm like, "Yeah, bartended through college, and I would hustle. I'm really fast, and I'm willing to work hard and do it." And like, she's like, "Are you Irish?" I'm like, "I'm part Irish, like 30% or whatever." She's like, "Okay, cool. We'll try you out for a couple shifts." So it turns out I had landed myself at one of the busiest Irish bars in New York City. Right? It was routine that we would bring between $2,000 and $9,000 a night each on a huge bar, like middle of Times Square, all kinds of tourists from all over the world. And this is like 2007 going into 2008. So the crash hadn't happened yet, but it was coming. So every day during the week, we'd have these bankers from Lehman and Goldman and Bear. They'd come in and drop all this money and bring out all their clients and spend $3,000-4,000 on like a Tuesday, and they would write 20% on the line. It wasn't their money. They didn't care. Maybe some of them saw what was coming. Maybe some of them didn't. And one day, we went from making sometimes $400, $500, $600 a night. I think my best night in tips was St. Patty's Day. I worked 22 hours. I made like $1,400 in a day. It was a grind. I would never do that again. And all of a sudden we're like making 100, 150 a night. It was like the wind had been sucked out of New York City because all the bankers went away. The tourists didn't know how to tip. They didn't know how to take care of it. That's not like part of their culture, right? So my income all of a sudden went from, and I had moved to Manhattan, so I was like walking distance from this place now at this point. So all of a sudden my bills were much higher. I was making good money and dating a woman who was like 10 years older than me, who was like a HR rep at Morgan Stanley, and she made like $250,000, $300,000 a year. She was taking me out, nice places. I might have cleared $100K that year in cash bartending. It was pretty great. Yeah. So I went from that to 100, 150 a night. I couldn't pay my rent. I had to move up to Harlem, and that was the whole thing. At this point, I did what I knew how to do. Like, I wasn't going to make money bartending anymore. I tried for a couple of weeks, pounding pavement. I tried everywhere. I literally went from, if you know the geography of New York, Upper West Side, Upper East Side, all the way down to the financial district. Like every single neighborhood, I just pounded pavement for 2 weeks. I just the same strategy, just wasn't working. But the divine thing is that it wasn't meant to work. I wasn't meant to get another job. I remember going to the White Horse Tavern down in the financial district, and the guy's telling me, like, nobody's going to hire you right now. Everybody's holding on to every penny they can get. They're just trying to stay alive. You're better off doing something else. Honestly, you're a smart kid. I appreciate you coming in, but you're better off doing something else. And that really stuck with me. I don't even remember the guy's name. He's an older Irish gentleman that told me that. I remember going down to like Broad Street and sitting on a bench and weighing my options. And I remember looking on Craigslist on my phone. And I'm like, well, when everybody's running out the door, maybe I should be running in the door. And it seemed like everybody was running out the door Wall Street at that moment. So maybe I'll run into the door. And maybe I'm like 19 or 20 at this time. I could figure it out exactly. But I started cold calling Wall Street firms. Like anything that said Wall Street job, anything that said broker, anything that said, become a stockbroker. I'm like, let's try this. So one firm I called is called E1 Asset Management. I can't remember the guy's name anymore. He's like the senior broker. And I got on the phone with him and I started telling him my story. And I'm like, listen, I want to get into this business. And I told him about my great uncle. I told him about my great grandfather, who was also a real estate developer kind of guy. He owned orchards and a lot of land on Long Island. And he liked my story. He says, come in for an interview. I remember it was 44 Wall Street, like the 9th floor. I remember I go into the conference room. It was like that kind of, you ever see that movie Boiler Room or Wall Street?
Yes.
It was like that,
yes.
that like Hitler Youth Rally interview. It wasn't quite like that, but it had like, it rhymed, So he's like, you're going to make all this money and it's going to be great. You're going to start at, $8 an hour or whatever it was. And it's going to suck, but you just keep with it. It's going to be great. So I'm like, all right, cool. Sign me up. So here I am. I'm getting up at like 4 a.m. in Harlem, taking the tube train down to Wall Street, getting off, getting to the desk by 6. I'm in this little windowless room. It's all Wall Street, but it's in this like closet basically. And they just give me a list of phone numbers to call. And they say, all right, dial for dollars, right? So it was my job to get there at 6. And from 6 to 12, I would call managing directors in the UK. As a managing director there. I'd hang up the phone. They would say no. Most of them would just, hang up on you. You couldn't get past the gatekeepers, but some of them would talk to you. And the leads that were like solid, not wood, that's what they would call them. Wood was like a dead lead or a bad lead. I would hand up to this guy who's the senior broker, and he would go and close them, and he'd give me feedback on what was good and what wasn't. Then I would take a half-hour break. I would go downstairs. I would get a new tie because I'd probably spilled coffee on it or whatever. They had like ties for $4 at the little kitchen stand, and I got a bagel and a coffee and went right back to it for 4 or 5 hours. But I'm like, all right, this time I'm going to hedge my bets. Right? Maybe Wall Street's not for me. I'm going to try real estate too. So at night, I was getting my real estate license. So I had a pretty full life. And I lasted at that job for about 3 weeks, maybe a month. And it just wasn't for me. And it was really grinding. But I got really good at just having people slam the phone down in my ear and say no to me a lot. So I was like, all right, cool. Lesson learned. It wasn't for me. They were actually pitching Visa stock at the time, which is a really good recommendation. All their clients are getting into Visa, and they probably 5 or 6x their money if they held it, plus dividends. Anyway, so that's 2008. The whole world's collapsing. The wind's been sucked out of New York City. I'm getting my real estate license. At the very end, this woman comes in named Orlinda Turtoro, and Orlinda and I start having a conversation. She recruits me for this firm called Bond New York. And I meet with the principals. It's 2 guys from Philadelphia. I'm still friends with them to this day. They're like my earliest mentors. Bruno and Noah, who run Bond, which is now I think the 8th or 7th largest real estate brokerage in New York. And at that time, they'd only been around maybe 5 or 6 years, and they already had like 400 agents working for them and 5 offices. It's just really dyed in the wool, like grinder guys. Build a real estate empire in New York City from scratch takes balls. It just does, right? When you're competing with Corcoran and Douglas Elliman.
Make it anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So like this is how I grew, right? This is like, okay, throw them to the wolves. So I ended up getting mentored by those guys, and I had a great boss named Nelson who showed me the ropes in real estate, and I had to learn everything from generating leads through Craigslist ads to closing sales, getting them in the door and closing deals and getting the landlords to cooperate. I was negotiating with billion-dollar landlords in New York City. A lot of people don't know this about New York City real estate. About 30 to 50% of the rental inventory at any given time is owned by like 4 or 5 big companies, and they're all private companies. They're all like family businesses. So it's artificially different than a lot of other places. That's the reason people pay like brokerage fees and things like that. But that's a whole digression. Anyway, so I did that for about 2 years. I got 5 promotions. At the end of that 2 years, I had about 6 people working under me. In fact, they gave me my own little like bubble office because I was so loud and obnoxious on the phone that people would complain. And they literally like took the secretary, moved him down the hall. There's like a sign that says reception when you come out of the elevator, and it was my office straight ahead when you walked in, like in that movie The Social Network where Mark Zuckerberg has the fishbowl office. That was my team in that room. And like you open the door, you hear me yelling or talking on the phone, and we close the door, and it would just be back to normal. It was pretty fun. So that was all good and all well, and I started making money, and everything was good, and I really learned entrepreneurship through that business. It was like a cool incubator type environment where I wasn't completely on my own, but it was if anything was going to happen, I had to make it happen.
Yeah.
So I rode that from 2008 to 2010. 2010, about midway through, I'm on the train on my way back home to see my mom. It's Mother's Day, 2010, and I get a phone call about 2 stops from Ronkonkoma where I get off the train. And it was somebody I'd never heard from before, and they were calling from my dad's number. And I said, what's going on? And he said, this is Officer so-and-so. We found your dad. He passed away. I said, I'll be right there. And I was in shock, obviously. And I was like kind of relieved because he'd always been suffering his whole life and alcoholism. And, we were close, but he was in a bad way. Like he was 61 and he just drank, a fifth of vodka every 2 days and smoked and all this other stuff for many, many years. So I was partially relieved, and then I partially felt horrible for feeling relieved. But I knew he was at peace, right? And I had a dream later, maybe 6 months later, where I was just talking about this with another friend of mine that actually lost his dad. I had a dream about my dad that he could walk without pain, and I woke up crying. It was like the most beautiful dream I'd ever had, because my whole recognition or remembrance of my dad was him being in pain and trying to figure that out. And just like sucking it up so that he could raise me. And that was all he could do. Like he literally had nothing else to give, and then he died. So yeah, that was rough, and that kind of left a mark on me. And then all of a sudden, like those stocks that weren't whittled away, my dad didn't really know how to manage money. He just kind of held on to it, and he got hit in 2008 pretty hard because he wasn't diversified and didn't really understand any of that. What was left, which is a relatively small amount of money at that time, went to me. So between what I was doing in real estate and what I'd saved and his money, now I had like enough money where like I felt like I was good. Like I could take some time and really process all the stuff. And then, family stuff happened, and they all, we kind of fell away, and it was kind of rough because my dad was the last of 4 to die. My grandparents passed away. My uncle died when I was 8. He was the last one. So I didn't realize it before he passed away, but he was holding that family together. And when he died, it kind of fell apart, and we all went our separate ways. So I had this house and a little bit of money and some stock, and I kind of did the best I could with it, but I wasn't ready for any of that. I was 24 years old. I thought I was. I thought I knew what the hell I was doing, but I didn't. So I spent about a year trying to figure out what I was going to do next, and I went back to real estate for a minute, and I tried to do like high end and sales, and it just wasn't doing it for me. But I'd always wanted to learn how to invest and trade, and I was like, well, I'm not going to get a better time than this. I've got some money. Let me figure it out. So that figuring it out process became this journey in trading and learning and being mentored. And I bought like Tim Sykes' course, and then I got introduced to some guys named Sang Lucci that was like, self-taught. And I met some other traders that were like market makers and learned that side of the game. And it was just, one thing kind of led to another thing, kind of led to another thing. It just felt, looking back, very guided, that I was supposed to do this, at least for that time in my life. And I think now, having perspective on what's happening in cryptocurrency and like being a voice of reason and like a seasoned investor that actually had success and a track record, I can look back and say, okay, I'm really glad that I went through that, because now I don't get like rose-colored glasses about crypto. Because I had rose-colored glasses about 3D printing, which did well for a time, and I got published in Forbes and talked to Richard Branson about that and all kinds of cool stuff. But it was good, and then it wasn't. It's still too early, right? It's just there's not a lot of value in that space, although I think the technology is still sound. It's just stocks don't behave based on whether there's utility or not. They behave on fundamentals, technicals, price action, news, and sentiment. And if all those 5 things aren't working for you, then you're going to have trouble finding a rising stock. So I learned a lot. I made a lot of mistakes. I made and lost and missed out on millions of dollars. One great example is Bitcoin. I was making apps in 2008 as a side hustle, and I sold one for $5,000. But back then, you could like basically write a long essay and code it into an app. You could pay somebody a few $100s to do it, and it would just sell, right? $2, $3, $4 at a time all over the world, and you just get a check at the end of the month. It was revolutionary. It was the exponential economy, and I was like the first thing I ever created that people were buying, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. So I did that. And then this company contacted me. I worked out a deal with them. They bought the app. I was like, all right, right on. And then guess what happened next? I went to the guy and I said, hey, what do you want to do with this money? We just, what would you code if you could code anything? He said, I want to code a Bitcoin trading app. And I'm like, what the heck is Bitcoin? I never heard of Bitcoin. It was like 2009, right? So long story short, Bitcoins were 5 cents at the time. I gave this kid $5,000 to build what he thought. He was trying to build like Coinbase. Like he was way out of his element. There was just no way on that amount of money with his experience that he could do it. And pretty quickly he failed. But had I just bought the damn Bitcoin, I'd be a billionaire with a B. Like no joke. Yeah. Like 100,000 Bitcoin would be worth over $2 billion right now. And this is December 21st, 2017. So, in that amount of time, 8 years later, you just don't know. Like the exponential economy, exponential investments, utility at scale, when somebody figures something out, it goes fast. And that's really the lesson here is like invest in the underlying asset. Try to get a piece of the upside. If you're not sure, invest in a couple different things. But on the other hand, you got to manage the risk too. You can't get rosy-eyed about any one thing. And I think this is the perfect time to tell a story about my great-grandfather, who was the real estate guy. So he owned a ton of land, and he had there wasn't a lot of demand for housing at the time. It was out on Long Island, and he had a lot of land, so he would either sell some off to pay the taxes or get a house built or, give it in trade, or he would plant orchards. And he had a saying. He said, an orchard's not one tree. I don't plant one tree and say, there's my orchard. I plant 1,000 trees, knowing full well that some will live and some will die, but I have no earthly idea which are which beforehand, so I must plant a lot and water them all so that one day I'll have a thriving orchard. And that really stuck with me, that lesson. And that's how I invested in my hedge fund. That's how I invest now. I don't get too crazy about anything. I just try to make good decisions consistently over time, knowing that some are not going to work out, but I can't see in the future which are which. Too many people get hung up on making decisions. It's in fact been proven that the more successful people in life make many more decisions and fail a lot more than the most unsuccessful. So it's not making the wrong choice that's killing you. It's making no choices at all. So there's a great book called The Paradox of Choice by Barry Schwartz, which I recommend to everybody. But the two main takeaways are the more options you consider and the longer you take to make decisions, the less satisfied you'll be with your ultimate choice, right? So he recommends just pick three. Pick three options, get referrals or recommendations if you can. Pick no more than three, because one is not a choice, it's a mandate. Two is a dilemma. And three is actually like, okay, you can pick the best one. You got two backups, or you can just reestablish or just rejigger the whole thing the next time when you go ahead and make that next decision. But keep making decisions, keep moving forward, make the best decision you know how to make, ask for referrals, ask for recommendations, and just keep moving quickly, because that's what's really going to make you successful. And with investing, it's not about, the one trade. It's about, can you make good trades over time, right? I didn't always win in the hedge fund. In fact, I lost more trades than I didn't, but the losses were small because I had stops and the wins were big. I could make trading options. I could either lose it or lose a lot of it. You'd either be down 50% on a small amount of money, or you make 2,000%.
All right. There's a lot of current themes throughout your life. What I'm seeing here, things like really family is one of the strong things I'm seeing in your journey, especially seeing what your father's done and the legacy that your grandfather left previously. And then you're talking about this fast action moving and learning from the mistakes that you had and seeing when it's time to move on. I guess the question that comes from that is, where do you start to change? Because at some point you went into the finance game and you started trading. How did that opportunity come about? And when you decided it was time to leave?
So it came about because I had written this article in Forbes after I met Richard Branson. Richard Branson had this charity event that I was at, and he kind of blew me away because he's like, I'm giving everybody here a platform. It matters that you're in the room tonight. I don't care if you just sold your company for $1 billion or if you're just starting out. I was on the latter end of that sentence, and he wanted to hear our story. So I geeked out on 3D printing when it was my turn, and he was like, oh, email me about that. I'm like, oh, okay, rebel billionaire Richard Branson, I'll email you. But I didn't get his email from him. I went to his assistant afterward, and she's like, all right, screw off, kid. So I didn't get in touch with him then. I did eventually close that loop, but at the time I didn't feel worthy, or I wasn't experienced in such things, so I didn't do that. But I had the story, and I went and I told the story to a guy who had an article, a column in Forbes. And then, that kind of led to, hey, do you want to do an article in Forbes? And I ended up doing that article. I'm sorry, the typing is very distracting. If you want to mute, you probably won't hear it. Anyway, so I did this article in Forbes. It ends up getting tweeted by Tim Ferriss. About 300,000 people read it. And it was, that kind of catalyst that became a really big deal in that space, right? All these Silicon Valley investors are reading it, and they're buying the stock. I guess they did their own research and thought it was a good idea too. And the stocks went up a lot. So that led to somebody calling me up and be like, hey, I read that article in Forbes. I paid for my wedding with that stock that you mentioned in there. How do I give you money to manage? I'm like, money to manage? I don't even know what that looks like, right? What do I need, like the Pope to wave a wand and say, you are granted hedge fundum? It turned out no. I could get a lawyer and an accountant, and I was off to the races. SEC, Blue Sky, Reg D, the whole thing. And I've told this story in other places, so I won't go crazy about it. But essentially, I started a fund. I went to 200 people. I raised money from 17 of them, just got really good at pitching and just telling my story, and got a little better every time. When they would say no, I'd ask them why, and I would take the feedback. So there I was. I raised a fund, and I raised like 350, 400 grand to start. And within a year, we had doubled it. It was 106% return that year in 2013. And that was great. So we were really excited, and I had this month where, I was a partnership with my fund and another fund. We did like $1,040,000 in profits one month. And it was like, holy crap, we did all this money and we're like partying. And I'm like, why do I feel so shitty? Why do I feel so empty? Why do I feel so disconnected and burned out? And I'm working so hard. I didn't feel like myself. And it was kind of then that I knew that it wasn't going to last. But I spent another year doing it because people would like wire you money in the middle of the night. 80, 90 grand would show up in your account in the morning from Switzerland or someplace. You'd be like, who the hell sent me all this money? It was kind of a surreal experience. But it was a really telling experience of like that. When things are winning, people will get behind you. So you just got to get to that point. You just got to suck it up long enough to get above that line of super credibility where people are like, okay, this is the thing I want to be involved with. And then they'll be involved. And you, as a visionary, as an entrepreneur or investor, whoever, have to be able to see that thing so clearly and get after it tenaciously until you get some sort of traction, because nobody in the world is going to invest in your idea until you have proven it yourself first. Like, I had to make every deal possible to get people to invest. I had to put up $100,000 of my own money to do it, to get people to just say yes. And once they were saying yes, they were really happy. But getting people to make that decision initially was a little bit of a slog, honestly. So the reason I got out of it was I wasn't fulfilled. I didn't like my lifestyle. I didn't like the people I was spending time with. I didn't like just the job was a grind. I'm like a people person. I don't want to sit behind a computer all day, although it's kind of funny that I do now. But I do it staring at the ocean in Cardiff instead of, out in New York City grinding out. Yeah, exactly. I surf a little bit. I got 3 boards in the garage. I got a great life, and now we have 3 companies, and it's beautiful, and we're working on cool projects, and I'm helping a lot of people. Ostensibly, that's not just me saying it. Like, you can read the testimonials on our website. People like flip out. They get really great value from our masterminds and our trips, and we go to Tony Robbins, we go to China, Hong Kong, Greece. We do house builds in Mexico. Like, I wouldn't trade my life now for any other life. It's a really beautiful life, and I will make a lot of money, and it's on my way to doing that again. We're on track to do 7 figures again next year. But it's not coming from a place of I need to fix my demons. It's coming from a place of I want to grow and contribute more, and that's more important. It's like the fulfillment is the target, not just the money.
Get to this point without going through the realization of what you don't want.
100%, 100%, and that's kind of what my philosophy is now. Is like, what I was working in before real estate and finance, especially, are a zero-sum game, right? Zero-sum games force people to act in scarcity mindsets, because they believe that in that scenario there's only enough to go around, and they kind of get blinders on. It's just, I got to win at all costs, right? It's a finite game. Finite games produce winners and losers, and if you play a finite game, you got to win so that you can win, and it has to come at the expense of somebody else, and there's no room for negotiation there. It's just, that's it. I got to win at all costs, and I'm going to maximize the best I can. The winners in that space have a really good sense of everybody's needs and can do that. It wasn't for me. I didn't like not telling people the truth, or being surreptitious, or being, shady. Like, sometimes my deals don't work out, but damn straight I'm going to tell you every little detail of why I won't. And yes, that costs me money all the time.
I've definitely noticed that with you, especially with your cryptocurrency you were talking about recently, and I think was it you that emailed someone and literally told them you shouldn't be investing in crypto right now? Probably not for you.
Yeah, and that person was ready to buy my course. I could have sent him an email and say, hey, you should buy this course, and it's the best thing since sliced bread, and you're going to make all your money back. No, this guy's 70 years old. He was a Madoff victim. He doesn't need to be getting involved in cryptocurrency. That's like the worst. That's the biggest headache he could ever take on. I really don't. And if he wants to, after I give him that warning, fine. But he didn't end up joining the course, and that's fine. Like, I am okay with that. And I tell people in my courses all the time, like, it's okay to get yourself educated and then do nothing with this, because this is an extremely risky thing. Like, it's just the same way as, like, I don't really do angel investing or VC, because guess what? The best in the world with billions of dollars and all the information and all the connections still get it wrong 9 out of 10 times. And that's for equity or convertible collateral debt. Like, now we're just buying ether, like vaporware that's like code in somebody's little ecosystem they dreamed up. It doesn't have any value. It doesn't even necessarily have any utility. And even if the company wins, you don't necessarily own a piece of that company that's winning. So people are asking me about all these ICOs, and I'm like, guys, you're buying nonsense. Most of these are going to zero. And you just don't get it because you don't understand how the mechanisms of finance work. But I'm trying to tell people, like, people are going to get hurt. If it's not an outright Ponzi scheme, it's still very difficult to have a startup and win. And then when there's nothing tied to the upside on top of that, it's just basically unsophisticated people getting taken advantage of. So if you're going to invest in crypto, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying have your eyes open about it. Don't get caught up in all the shiny objects, right? Find the things that have utility, that have mass adoption, that have demands where you can buy and sell pretty liquidly and get in and out so you don't get hurt so bad, and not just any coin that somebody can code in 20 minutes with Solidity and Ethereum. It's crazy.
There's a lot of passion there, passion behind that.
Well, because I see all the hucksters coming out of the woodwork, and I'm not going to say names, but you know who they are, right? The people saying, "Oh, you're going to make a bajillion dollars, 18,000, 15,000, 22,000% on your money." Yeah, if you have a crystal ball and a time machine, you can make that kind of money. Yes, if you were in Bitcoin from day one, you can make that kind of money. I personally have made over 170x on my returns in Bitcoin. I've made 100x in my Ethereum, depending on the day, right? It goes up and down, and like maybe 16 or 17 times in Litecoin. That's great. That's awesome. I'm super happy with that. If you caught any of that upside, you'd be really happy. But I wasn't betting, hundreds of thousands of dollars either, right? And honestly, I'm a little bit nervous about the entire space. Not that it's not going to like go up in flames overnight. I don't think that'll happen. Certain coins might. And certain things will turn out to be Ponzi schemes, and there's some that are already blowing up. One person I know got taken for one. But what I'm trying to say is like either have a buy and hold strategy. If you're going to trade it, good luck to you. It's 24/7. It's faster than any market I've ever seen. I don't recommend that for 99.9% of the population. But if you just want to get a little bit in that you like, if you were to put an amount of money that you're entirely okay with losing into crypto and maybe once a year rebalance it among the top 5 or 10. That's probably a strategy I can get behind, right? And just see what the market does, and just see if you can because it could be like my great uncle, where it's like a couple $100 becomes retirement for the next generation. But if you're looking to get rich quick or fix the sins of your past in one fell swoop, that's just nonsense. You're just going to get hurt.
It sounds like you're really protective over the little guy. Would that be a fair statement?
I would say yes, yeah, and only because I don't believe in a world where only certain people can win. The fact that there's 5 people that own just as much wealth as the bottom 50% in this world, that's a problem, right? That means the game is not set up for everybody to win. It's a finite game. Infinite games, on the other hand, the rules are set up, and its incentivization is to keep the game going so that more people can win over time. Right now, we're like draining the bank account of planet Earth to turn it into money and productivity that nobody needs, or the people who need it don't get it. And we already produce enough food to feed the world for a week every day in the United States. And we already have enough energy that hits the planet in the Sahara Desert to power the world for 10 years every day. And we already have water and clean water filtration technology, like that billionaire in India that did the 5-hour energy deal. He can already make that happen. And finally, like shelter with 3D printing and other technologies coming down, we could have like a complete, I call it lighting the fuse, food, energy, water, shelter, abundance in a sustainable way could be the norm in the future. That could be the basic. Like here's Earth. Welcome, you're a human. We have your food, your energy, your water, your shelter, and now you can stop spending all your time, energy, attention just scrounging to survive. You can actually use it to thrive and create. And if that was cheap enough or reasonable enough to either be covered by UBI or be so cheap that most people could do it by doing tasks on Upwork, that creates a floor which increases the productivity of the planet and the GDP of the planet. And there's been tons of studies and great people on my podcast. You want to get into it about those arguments with smarter people than I have. But I want to be a part of that conversation. What comes next, right? There's a great saying by Winston Churchill. Democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. I feel like capitalism is the same way. Just like feudalism or socialism, those are models that didn't work out for the long term. Capitalism, it's the best we got, but it doesn't mean it's the end. I think we can continue to iterate and scientifically approach this problem to create better systems to serve more people. And that's what Make More Marbles is all about. It's this idea that we don't need to grab for all the marbles. We can literally make more. It's that infinite sandbox of creation. What happens when you heat up sand? Glass. What happens when you give it a twist? Marble.
Love it. You seem to have a very much principle-based way of thinking. You talk about these zero-sum games, finite resources versus infinite resources. Where has this way of thinking come from? Is it from the books you've read, or...?
Pain, dude. I was the kid who got bullied all the time. I got the shit kicked out of me as a kid. I thought there was a better way, that's all. And from then on, I just focused on relationships and people. And I really, truly care about people. I know it sounds fucking crazy, but I do. And it doesn't always work out from the best. And I have to kind of check myself sometimes. But I truly, at the end of the day, I'm a lover of people. And I believe in humanity. And I know we can do better. Because we are doing better. I do have another call coming up, so we're going to have to wrap this up, unfortunately.
If you could have access to only 5 books in your life, what books would you choose?
Okay, great question. Principles by Ray Dalio, both economic and investing, and this one here is life and wealth principles, or life and work principles, rather. I would pick anything by Tony Robbins, really. I really love Money Master the Game. I thought that was a great book. It opened my eyes to Dahlia, so I'm forever grateful. 5 books. I would say there's a book by Kurt Vonnegut that changed my life. And it's not like a tactical, practical kind of book. It's just a great story. It's called God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater. If you like Vonnegut, check out Cat's Cradle too, if you haven't, or you probably have if you know. I'm really enjoying right now a book called Masters of Rome, the Masters of Rome series. It's like a long fiction book that's just drawn out and like really just gets into the heart of, Roman society. And this woman is like mega detailed, and the books are 1,000 pages long. And that's something I've been geeking out on. And then Abundance by Peter Diamandis. That book changed my life. It's still 40 years ahead of its time, and it came out in 2010 or 2011. So I would check those out.
10 years from now, we sit down, have this conversation again. In our ideal world where everything goes to plan, you haven't had any hiccups, where would you be and what would you be doing?
I would be here I live in North County, San Diego, and it's beautiful. I live right in the ocean, 5-bedroom house. I mean, my life is idyllic. I'm so grateful and blessed, honestly. I got nothing to complain about. If I could be here or nearby, living the life I'm living, serving the way I want to serve at a higher level, and having those conversations with the people who can actually make those changes in the world that I described, or having already done it. Like the Make More Marbles thing, it ends one day. One day we will have made enough marbles. That's the food, energy, water, and shelter. I call it lighting the fuse. So until that mission is complete, that's the mission. So yes, that will require earning money, that will require having connections, that will require having conversations, that will require a lot of creativity and a lot of failure. But I'm up for it, and God willing, if I keep living, I'm going to keep after it. Because I can't think of a better way to leave this planet better off than I found it than helping humans in that way, in a sustainable way.
Finally, if you could leave people listening to this episode with just one thing they remember, what would that be? Everything
that life is, every building you've ever lived in, every subway you've ever ridden, every car you've ever driven started as an idea in somebody's head. Everything that we are, all of society started out as an idea in somebody's head that has the same exact potential that you do right now. The only difference between them and you is that they took action consistently and weren't afraid to fail consistently. And it's not that they don't have fear, it's that they just get better at dealing with it over time.
Love it. So
you can too.
Brad, this has been fantastic. If people want to connect with you, learn more about Make More Marbles, and join the community, where can they go, and what's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, please. I love people reaching out. I'm getting a little bombarded right now with the crypto craze. I get over 100 messages a day at the moment, so if I don't get back to you, don't take it personally. But Facebook.com/Brad Hart, BRADHART. I'm also at MakeMoreMarbles.com. And you can see the crypto cheat sheet. You can see we go bring people on trips and different charitable stuff. Syrian refugee camps, building houses, Tony Robbins, China, this and that and the other thing. If you want to get involved in a trip, come on down. And then finally, check out the podcast. The podcast is great. We've done almost 100 interviews now. And, I'm talking luminaries like, the CEO of Virgin Galactic and former chief of staff at NASA and best-selling authors, really great, awesome people that are doing cool stuff in the world and creating the future. So please come check it out and come play with us.
Awesome. All right, guys, until next episode, we'll see you all very soon.
Thank you.